Welcome back to the Growth Hack Franchise Marketing Unleashed. I'm your host, Marcus, and today we're talking about something that every franchise owner, marketer, and sales team needs to hear. Bad leads aren't actually bad. Every so called bad lead starts as a good prospect, someone who showed interest but never converted. The question is why? That's exactly what we're diving into today. And joining me, as always, is Mckenzie. How are you, Mckenzie?
I'm good, Marcus. How are you doing today?
I'm good.
I'm excited for this conversation because I think so many business owners write off leads way too soon. They think that person wasn't serious when in reality they just nurtured properly. So I think let's start with the obvious. When someone calls a lead bad, what exactly does that even mean?
I think a lot of times when people say bad lead, they mean a lead that didn't convert, a lead that they couldn't get on the phone or they couldn't get to reply to a text message. And here's the thing, every lead starts as a potential customer. If they expressed interest at some point, they weren't bad, they just weren't ready or they weren't nurtured properly. I think so many times people try to go to third base right away with leads versus nurturing them and courting them down the pathway to help educate them to a decision.
So that brings me to my next question. How much does follow-up actually impact conversion rates?
Massively. I think across the board, you could have terrible lead gen, but really great follow up that converts at a high percentage. But studies show that 80% of sales require at least 5 follow ups, but 44% of salespeople give up after 1 to 2, which is wild, right? The difference between a lead converting and a lead disappearing is often just persistence. It's interesting. I was just watching this guy. He's an amazing kind of business owner, sales guy. And he said that he has his sales team reach out to leads. I believe within the first week, they contact the leads 39 times. If at the end of those 5 to 6 days, they don't engage, then they say, okay, you're just not ready, right? Because they've done the due diligence. And so I think it's okay if you do the due diligence, then you're like, okay, maybe they're just not ready right now. But for most, they reach out once or twice, and most people can't handle rejection in that sense. And so they give up and they're like, well, I'm on to the next one. We have leads coming in, so I'm just going to move on to the next one. And hopefully that one will be a yes. But they submitted their info, their name, their email, their phone number. Obviously, at some point, they were interested in the service or product.
So let's talk about those leads that, like you said, just weren't ready yet. What do we do with those? If we know like, okay, it's contacted them 30 something times and they're just not converting. Do you just write them off? What kind of happens from that point?
Yeah, so I don't think you ever truly write a lead off unless they've opted out, right? That is to me the discerning thing of like, listen, you have every consumer because of TCPA laws and things of that nature has the ability to opt out of that funnel. That should be your end game, right? Like we're going to continue to reach out. Now, that doesn't mean continue to reach out 39 times a week, but you can move them into something that's just a much longer term nurture. And it just keeps them. We see this often in like the real estate world. Even for us, we've got agents that have helped us buy houses, and they still send us stuff every year. But when we go to build a house or buy a house or something in that nature, it's the first person that comes to mind because I'm constantly saying, I see the happy birthday, all of those types of things. And so even though it's not relevant today, in 12 months, it might be relevant to me. It's really important to keep them in there as long as they'll stay without opting out. And so again, I don't think there should be any real life cycle. They just move into a different campaign that's not as heavy and pointed to get them to do something now. So it's important to know like, hey, listen, they gave you your information, they give you permission to harass them for a limited period of time before it becomes annoying. Right. And so that's where you have to be very cognizant of like, hey, we need to back off, but we still want to keep you in the know. And that should be overly educational content, not buy. Just educate them and let them live their life. Next time they need a service like yours will come first to mind, hopefully.
Right. That makes sense. So, what would you say is the biggest mistake that you see businesses when they're treating their leads? Like, what is the biggest no-no?
Yeah, I mean, I think most businesses treat their leads like transactions. I think they focus so much on the end game that they forget there's an actual person and consumer and customer that has a need that they're trying to fulfill. Now, I think there are many businesses that do a great job at it, but I think a lot, and especially I think in early days, like new startup businesses, I think a lot of times you're so hungry for the next dollar that you forget that there is this relationship sense. Because let's be honest, the first buy is never really the goal for most any company, right? You want that long-term recurring. It doesn't matter if you're in memberships, it doesn't matter if you're in e-com, service, products, whatever that is. If you have a brick and mortar store, you want the return customer, you want the return client. And we see it like in the gym world or the fitness world. Fitness centers still have a high churn, but it used to be much higher before they started focusing on the relationship side, because people would come in and then how do you enhance a gym membership, right? I mean, like there's only so many things you can do. We were like, let's add childcare, but like that's a sense of building relationship. You're coming in, your child's there, they're in childcare. You're building these kind of relationship based things. You're making friends, like all of those things, bringing community into it. Because if you're just going in and out, you're like, well, I'll just go to this gym because no one talks to me. It doesn't matter. And you see that high churn. So really focusing on building the relationship, building trust, because when people trust you, they befriend you. When they befriend you, they will stay around. I've seen it in the salon industry. There are hairstylists that may or may not, it's completely opinion based, give the best haircut or color, right? But I've seen women stay for the conversation, right? Like they stay for the relationship, they stay for that part of it. Because if it was just solely based on the end result, there's many other places to go that you might get a better result. And so again, it's that piece that if you really want longevity in business, you have to focus on first.
Well, and I was gonna say, I mean, I've heard you talk about so many times, if you actually are looking at it in relationship terms, you wouldn't go to a first date and propose to someone, right? So I guess what is the difference? Like if businesses would just take that idea of when they're writing their first ad, trying to make their first sale, what would happen if they actually just thought of it as, I'm just trying to get this person's attention. I just want to start a relationship. What would the difference in messaging be? As if one is like, buy now, then how would you change your messaging to more of starting a relationship instead of being so salesy?
I think the biggest thing, and this will vary by product and service, but ask questions. People want to know that you are genuinely interested. Ads are no different. Humanity is not stupid, right? Like we understand you have a service or product that you want to sell us. Our mind has already gone there. But why should we pick you? Why you? And so, whether that's in copy or that's in phone calls or that's in-person engagement, your core focus, everything you write that copy about, all of those things should be about fixing a problem. First, actually, let me back up. What is the bane of their existence? What annoys them that you can solve for them? Focus on them first. You should never walk in talking about yourself. We all get it. They all get it. There's something there, but you should go in and saying, like, what are you struggling like, what is it that I can fix for you, is there anything that I can do, and then let it lead down that pathway, but put them first. And again, it's hard, right? Because we all have, especially like salespeople, you have an urge inside to just get after it and everything, and it's eating you alive. But you have to hold that tiger back and say, okay, look, I want to know more about you first, and then I'll tell you a little bit about me. And if you can start it like that, it's a lot less abrasive. And copy is the same way. There are ways to not go out and say, hey, do this, buy this. Some of the best copy I've seen is where they actually ask questions, and they invite people in the comments to say, like, listen, here's a little bit about what we do, but we want to know what your problem in relation to this is. Like, how could it change your life if this? And people communicate with that. And they're like, you know what? I've been struggling with that. Now I see it. Now I can see a pathway to this relationship and maybe engaging in that business. So really just changing it up from, hey, come and buy and give me your money, to how can I help? How can I be of assistance to you? No strings attached as of this moment.
Right. Okay. So let's pivot a little bit and let's talk about automation. Obviously, you talked about, sending 30 something follow-ups.
Right.
Nobody, I don't think, could possibly do that. So what about like drip campaigns, autoresponders? Where do they fit in?
Yeah, I mean, when it comes to having a really successful follow-up campaign, automation is going to be key. You can't do it all, but also by doing it yourself, you're never going to understand the data, right? There's so many email automation platforms now that you can do that with, right? MailChimp and many others, depending on the robustness of that you need in that perspective. But there's platforms like Zapier that you can use to connect all your data points. At the end of the day, it doesn't matter what platform, what email platform, what SMS platform you use. The most important thing is that you step back and are able to see that data correlated into one place and make decisions based on that. Where is your drop off in the nurture journey? Where are people reading to, but then they're kind of like, no, this isn't it. Because then you need to optimize and change that and say, okay, this message is not connecting, right? Maybe it's too salesy. Maybe it's not salesy enough if it's farther down the pathway. Most people let their opinion get the best of them, and they come in and they write their content, they write their emails, they write their SMS, and they send it, and they're like, this is the best thing I've ever seen. This is my best work, right? And they send it, but they never measure that data, and they just assume that, hey, if you don't like that or it didn't connect with you, it's your fault, right? You're the problem, not me. And so, but by testing that, you have to take your opinion and what you think is right out of it and say, look, maybe there are people out there that don't think the way I do, and maybe they don't connect the way I do, and maybe I need to change that, and eventually change that by demographic. I think there's very different ways to speak to not only like age demographics, the younger, the middle age, the older, but men and women. Depending on your product, you may want to change how you're communicating, what those emails are saying, what the ads are saying, what the text messages are saying. All of those things can really come into place. And then if you want to get like super fine tuned down it, if you have a sales team that is making calls and things, like navigate that. Does your women based audience connect better with a women's sales rep versus a male sales rep? So like there's all of those types of things that most people don't think about. They just think, well, I'm going to send it, and if they want it, they'll buy it. And that's just not the case anymore because society wants that hyper personalized experience.
So I know you just touched on that a little bit, but I was going to ask, like, how can businesses figure out why their leads aren't converting? What would you say is like one of the most common mistakes that people are making that are causing people to not convert?
I think you have to look at your data. If leads keep dropping off at a certain stage, it's a red flag. Are they ghosting after the first call? Maybe your pitch isn't strong. Are they clicking but not buying? Maybe your landing page needs work. Data is everything from day one of your business. If you're getting ready to start a business from day one, the most important thing you can do is make sure that your data is being tracked in every place that you're putting ad dollars, you're communicating, all of those things. You need to be tracking data from first touch to last touch to current customer engage, all of those things. Because if you're not a new business and you have current customers you've been communicating with, 90% of the time, you can tell what you should be doing on the top of the funnel by looking at the bottom of the funnel and understanding how they're communicating, what they're asking for, what they're missing, what their complaints are. But so many people just are like, oh, they're complaining, they'll be fine. It's just another complainer. Like, but take that, get yourself out of the way and take that and leverage that to say, you know what, that issue could fix the top of the funnel. And if that fixes the top, bottom of the funnel is going to look a lot better after it kind of rotates through. And so data is everything. You can't make a smart decision without having the data one and being able to understand it and pivot and test and figure out what is going to work for your demographic.
That's a great reminder. Somebody that maybe has bought one item, two items, but isn't really like fully involved in your business yet. So like they're like a beginning relationship. How many times would you say is a good number to kind of stick to for reaching out to them again? Like you want them to be a full-on customer. What would be your kind of approach
Yeah.
for retargeting there?
I think in that sense, just remarketing to them on a monthly basis, maybe by twice a month, something in that nature. If they've purchased once, it's still a question of if they liked your product or service. If they've purchased twice, they like it, but it may be financial reasons that they haven't rebought. It may be just life happens. Or if you don't have retargeting and remarketing in place, they probably forgot about you. Or there's competition, and maybe there was a competitor that did a much better job at retargeting than you did, and they're like, well, you know what, I'm going to go over there because I feel valued. I feel valued enough that they put that in front of me. There is an extremely healthy way to retarget and remarket where your current customers, meaning anyone that's been in at least once, can feel valued and want to become a brand advocate versus feeling like you only want their their credit card. And so, really like a couple times a month, but you should just be focusing on educational material. They've already made the decision once to come in and get the product, right? You don't have to just, continue to crush them and say, hey, come by, here's the sale. Because I see so many people do that. 10% off, 15% off, come in Tuesday between 5 and 7, and you can get 3% off. And they're sending that to their current customers who have already said, look, I like you. I've accepted you. We're fine. I'm just living life and I haven't made it back in. But you can send them educational things around like what the product is, what's inside the product, the service, new services that are coming out. But you don't have to end it with buy now, here's 10% off. End it with a we can't wait to see you again. That's super low committal, right? We can't wait to see you again. It makes them feel like it's an invitation, but we're not forcing you to come in and we're not trying to just say, hey, here's 10% off. And so there are light ways to still say, we want you to come back. And mentally for them, when you read that, you're like, yeah, you know what, I should go back. But they feel valued because you continue to give them information and new tactics about, why this, that, or the other is working and what consumers are saying. Just get out of the flash sale mode in your mind when you start writing these emails and texts.
Yeah, sometimes when I get those like discount emails, basically, it almost feels, and this sounds cliche because it is, but it feels cheap. It
Mhm.
feels like they're not worth the full price. Like I have to discount this brand in order for you to come buy it. Sometimes
Right.
that makes me feel like, well, maybe you were overpriced from the beginning and you knew you were going to have to give 10%.
Yeah, and I'm the same way because I'll pay full price for anything I feel is of value, right? But I'm busy, I'm distracted, so just keep writing me nice emails, and then eventually I'll get it. I think because there's been an oversaturation, I think that society, like mentally, we have blockers. I think we have discount blockers, and it's not to say we don't like discounts or sales or any of those types of things, but it's just to say that anytime we see a sales sticker or any of those things, like you start to relate it to like car salesmen. I think it's those things that you have to be really careful. It's not to say never ever do a sale, but be mindful because I see businesses dropping it like twice a week. They're like, hey, 10% off if you do this or 20% off, and those things, it makes you look cheap. People don't want to feel like they're buying cheap. If you get luxury and you're like, man, I got a pretty good deal on luxury, I'm okay with, but I don't want a pretty good deal on cheap. So there's a very fine line in how you speak about your brand and how you speak to your consumers.
This has been such a great conversation so far. If there was one takeaway, one mind shift that you think business owners need to make about leads, what would that be?
Never assume a lead is bad just because they didn't convert right away. Follow up, nurture, stay top of mind, provide value because every bad lead was once a good prospect for you and you just didn't nurture properly. I think that is at the core of really everything. Provide value. If you start with providing value, everything else will follow in that. I want to thank everyone for tuning in to the Growth Hack Franchise Marketing Unleashed. Be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with someone who needs to hear it. And we'll catch you next time.